Oh, I'm 6 minutes late. Ain't that awesome? Hey, everybody. I'm Lawrence Owen for Colts Law, and today I've got a special guest with me. I've got Adam Armbrecht, correct?
Nailed it. Oh, my goodness.
Yes. Well, I kind of had to look you up on Twitter and do some posting and copy pasting stuff, so I kind of got your name down. He's another guy over here on Sporstcastr that covers the Nets, covers the Giants. He's joined us for NFL news. He was just with me this morning on Sporstcastr covering the Thursday night game last night. Great knowledgeable guy. He's joining me to go over the Minnesota and the Indianapolis Colts game today. Hey, welcome, Adam.
Thank you, sir, man. It was a pleasure this morning breaking down Thursday night. And now I try to put on, as if people don't know, I'm a Giants guy, and that's where I do my coverage on the podcast and on Sportscaster as well. But now I put on the Vikings hat. I'm going to create enemies from the fan base as I try to maybe poke holes in Indianapolis's plans to win on Sunday against the Vikings, man. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think so too. Just give me one moment because I am sharing this to Twitter, and there she goes. All right, I can close Twitter out now. So I'm glad that you did a little research. I did a little research before we got on this stream because I was not super high on the Vikings going into the season because of the loss of both their starting cornerbacks from last year. And from the games that you watched, do you feel as though their replacements are going to are good replacements, or do you think that's something that the Colts wide receiving core of T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell, Michael Pittman could possibly take advantage of in this game?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you go back and you look even just at week one, right? Small sample size, but taking on the Packers, and by the way, coming into the year where people are thinking, or at least suggesting, that Aaron Rodgers is maybe on the back nine of it, he goes ahead and makes a statement there. It's interesting because while the Colts don't have the Devontae Adams on the roster, you got a lot of quality receivers. And when you go back and look at Rodgers' stat line, he spread that thing around a lot. Used Devontae Adams in the red zone on a short little out route pass there, but I think if you can spread this around, if Phillip Rivers can be smart about that and basically play to what the defense is giving you, you should see a lot of movement here. I don't think the Vikings quite know what they are yet defensively with some new pieces. And then even on the other side of the ball too, right? You lose a big key receiver on the outside. You want to play through Cooks. You still have Thielen, but there's question marks on both sides here for the Vikings. So early in the year, it's going to be a wait and see for them. And I think we say that a lot about a lot of teams in the NFL, I think right now, after 1 week with no preseason, but Vikings fall into that category. And to your point, I'm not as high on them coming in for a number of specific reasons that I'm sure we'll get into as we flex through here.
Yeah. Brandon Ace said that he really believes that Phillip Rivers will be able to do well when he's going up against rookie corners in that secondary. Let's just hope that he's not throwing it to the rookie corners like he did last Sunday. So I kind of get that. I understand.
Well, and some of the things you try to get from that first game too, if you're the Colts, right, on the offensive side, you try to go back and look at that Packers game. And one, you're going to take the easy things like where did Rodgers have success? Let's try to duplicate it. But also, what are the tendencies that we see from some of these young players for the Vikings, and how do we expose that, right? That's, when you have young players on either side, when you're going against them, you don't know yet entirely what they are at the NFL level. So every bit of tape you get on some of these guys is going to be the key. And then for a guy like Thielen, say for the Vikings or for you guys, now I know we're going to be we could get into it without a key piece at the tight end position, but when you think about T.Y. Hilton, right, veteran guy, didn't have a big week one, but he should be putting all of his skills to use against the suspect secondary.
So the Colts, it's not a secret that with that offensive line and the running backs that they have, even with the loss of Marlon Mack, they still have Naheem Hines. They still have Jordan Wilkins. They still have Jonathan Taylor. They want to run that football. Now, with the Vikings, they've got possibly one of the best linebacking corps in football with Eric Wilson, Eric Kendricks, and Anthony Barr sitting back there. And we can't forget Yannick Ngakoue, as we was talking earlier before the stream, came over as a pass rusher from the Jags, who knows Braden Smith real well out there on that right tackle. Who do you think actually favors in this matchup between the run game and that Vikings front seven?
Specifically in the run game, you have a quality offensive line for the Colts, and that's one of the big selling points why Rivers wanted to come there, right? Feel like he got the stability up in front of him. The difference here, again, I don't want to overdraw the comparisons to the previous week, but I don't tag either one of your running backs this week as a Jones. Right. I don't think, they haven't proven that yet for you. They're very complimentary, at least. Mac is. And then you wonder about Taylor. Right. And he looks like he's going to get the start this week. And that could be somewhat ceremonial as far as how the carries get broken down. You mentioned the right tackle. I'll go to the paper on this one. Ngakoue, going up against Smith in previous meetings, one tackle for a loss, 2 sacks, 5 QB hits, and 2 forced fumbles in those meetings. So listen, does that mean that that's what he's going to get here? Maybe not, but I can make the case, as talented as some of those Jaguars defensive units were, he's got better linebackers behind him there in Minnesota now. So if he starts to occupy on the right side and draw double teams, now you get into that linebacker core, they start to find some gaps, and it's going to be up to the Colts to scheme their way early to some easy run looks, get a couple of chunk yards, start to draw them in, and then think about attacking the weakness, which is the secondary of the Vikings. But it's all going to start up front there. And it's hard to push one way or the other, because I went back and looked at those stats from last week. It's not like the running attack for your Colts was, blowing the doors off, right? A lot of work through the air for Phillip Rivers, and that's great. But I always fall back on, you need to have running success, because at some point in the game, you want to be able to have a long drive that drains the clock, or to be able to punch in a couple of ones if you get down near the goal line. That can be, especially if Rivers has had a couple of hiccups there, a couple of interceptions, right? You might want to have the option to be able to pound that ball, at least for a couple series in this one.
I agree. And that brings us to the point with the run game. It has a lot to do with the tight ends. And for the injury report, we have an issue with that. Jack Doyle is out in this game completely, and he is well known for having a good run blocking skills. That's going to put Mo Alley Cox up front. Mm-hmm. And Mo Alley Cox, not really well known in the NFL. I can give you a little bit. I gave you a little bit beforehand. He is a really good run blocker. He's a really big, strong ex-basketball player that has came in, learned how to block first, and has shown the ability to make really good plays in the passing game. He's had a one-handed catch in the end zone one year. He's tough to bring down once he has the football in his hands. But who's the better guy? Who is the Vikings most likely going to use to cover tight ends? Like, sadly, we got Mo Alley Cox, and then we got Noah. I can't pronounce his last name. Togiai from Philadelphia. Those are our only 2 tight ends in this game, and the Colts love using 2 and 3 tight end sets. Who's going to be that? Who's going to be that guy? Is it going to be a linebacker? Or do you think it will be a safety for the Vikings that'll probably be covering them if he ends up going out for a route?
Yeah, if you think that maybe he's unknown, relatively speaking, and at the very least, if you're the Vikings, you look across, you say, hey, no Doyle. Okay, this is a better matchup for us going up against in run protection, trying to stymie that. It also makes it a little bit easier for us in our secondary in terms of where we want to put our attention. So while your instinct would be to say, naturally, you want to put one of your linebackers to pick him up coming out of there, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets passed off a lot, right? That little check on him as he's coming off the line, let a safety have to come down to deal with him. So if you're the Colts and you want to go silver lining here, you can think that when you're worried about Hilton, when you're worried about Taylor coming out of the backfield, when you're thinking about all these other weapons, you could find Mo Alley Cox with an opportunity to actually catch some early balls and help Phillip Rivers get into a rhythm. So if there's a natural athletic skill set there, and there's no point in faking it, I don't know anything about what he's going to be, but if he has a natural athletic skill set and he can be at least a reasonable contributor in that pass in the run blocking, excuse me, like you said, if he has that skill set as the start, now that means you can be on the field. And that's step one, help protect. That's going to be his number one job. The secondary thing is going to be, if we need a safety valve, can you convert a couple of these, maybe third and mediums, maybe surprise the Vikings, and then you start to force those linebackers to adjust. How much attention do we have to provide for him? And how does that then impact the secondary and how they use their safeties and maybe shading over for help on some of those receivers?
All right. Reese asks a question. How big is it that the Vikings lost Michael Pierce, Everson Griffin, and Hunter, and looks like none of those guys will be playing against the Colts this week? What kind of impact will that have?
Yeah, I mean, listen, Everson Griffin is obviously enormous for them. There's a reason why this defense looks a little bit in shambles right now, right? We mentioned fresh pieces in the secondary. That's one thing. But up front, you need that. Everson Griffin becomes a focal point. That's what helps to free up an Ngakoue. That's what allows Barr to accelerate. And these are guys that are talented in their own right. But when you talk about having second and third pieces that draw attention and sometimes double team attention, that's what makes everything easier. So when you mentioned earlier about the running attack for the Colts and what they're going to be able to accomplish, this means that across a strong offensive line for the Colts, they can say, maybe we start out one-on-one battles and let's see how the Vikings defense reacts to us. If you don't have Griffin on the field, listen, I can easily sway. We talked about where the line sat on this game. It's basically a pick 'em here. If you bring back in a couple of these pieces to the Vikings defense, you probably maybe even see this skew a little bit more in the direction of the Vikings because you're still wondering about what is the total feel of this Colts offense.
That's a good question. They were fairly balanced. It was 2-1 pass to run against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I think it really went that way after Mac got hurt. I want to take a moment here and thank Boston Bell, Behind the Ball Sports, and Merle Ball Fan for joining on Sportscastr. And everybody watching right now, please hit that like button and, man, share this stream. Just click the little share button down there, right click it, copy, and paste to your social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Get this out there so we can get some more people in here, and that way we know what's going on. Reese, I'll ask that question when we get to the defense, all right? So, how well do the Vikings, do you believe, do they do a good job in disguising coverages? Because, I mean, Phillip Rivers is an aged vet, right? He's been here a long time. He's seen just about everything. Do you think they can get to him? And if they can't get to them, do you think that they'll be able to disguise to create confusion?
Yeah, this makes me think about, and again, I hope I'm not trying to create a knock on the Colts, right? But Phillip Rivers at this stage of his career isn't on the same level as an Aaron Rodgers. Now, one of the things you can look at there, though, is say Aaron Rodgers isn't a terribly mobile guy, and neither is Phillip Rivers. So living inside the pocket is okay. You saw him have success against the Vikings last week. You also, though, did see in that game, Aaron Rodgers was utilizing a lot of quick passes, a lot of three-step drop, get it out of your hands, and they have a number of playmakers there. So the timing is what becomes really interesting, I think, from the Colts' perspective. Whatever Phillip Rivers is looking to do, that's first look. You got to go to your second. But within those first two, you want to be pulling the trigger, because even if we say, as they did, put up a lot of points against that Vikings defense, they were still getting there. They were still sniffing in the area of having pressure on Aaron Rodgers. So this really comes down to timing to me. It comes down to the familiarity. And if he can rely on the receivers to come out of those routes crisp, I think you're going to be okay in that. From a disguising the defense standpoint, I'll go pretty high level on this. I don't know what the Vikings are going to look to do or how good they are at disguising those looks. And it's hard to look at what Aaron Rodgers does against them versus maybe getting a more middle-of-the-pack quarterback in that first week sample. What I will say again, I don't want to beat the drum. When you have young players, when you have new players in a defensive system, you're going to shrink the game plan a little bit. You're going to try to mitigate overexposing them. So you're probably going to go more basic looks and try to see if you can hold off and have success in that regard. But that's the big thing I took away when I watched those clips and looked back at that replay from the Packers game was, even though he hit a couple of big balls out to Lazard, out to Devontae Adams, he was getting that thing out of his hands quickly to his receivers, letting them turn up field and make plays after the catch. And I think that could be another nice element for Phillip Rivers and the Colts offense to look at. Let's be a little bit up tempo, even if not down to down, but just once you snap that ball, find your route, hit the target, and let them work for you.
So do you think a kind of a no huddle might actually be in a Colts favor in this situation?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Listen, for sure. This is true about the NFL in general, by the way, right? Up-tempo offenses always make it more difficult on any defense. You don't get the chance to get those subs in. You don't get to get your sub packages on there, swap out based on down and distance. So a lot of times maybe where the Colts can think about it is if we're sitting there in a 3rd and short and we have a nice personnel package that we like, and we can maybe pound that ball for the first down, get right back up on that line of scrimmage and start to think about in a 2 wide receiver set. How do I get a nice go route for T.Y. Hilton? How do I look to get Campbell, who you were speaking highly of to me when we got together in the morning, right? How do I get a player like that involved and hopefully maybe catch the Vikings trying to sneak there and stack the box against what you would feel like is the better of the two matchups. For the Vikings defense, they're looking to shut down this run completely and take those risks in the secondary where they have the least amount of confidence on their side of the ball. So you can maybe catch them a couple of times there and put them in bad matchups from that standpoint. The other thing is now for the Colts, though, they have some of their own injury concerns even deeper there, right? Michael Pittman Jr. not going to be in this one. I'm going to forget the one other receiver that you got there is going to be out for you as well.
Well, Michael Pittman's questionable. He's not out. Give me a moment.
There. Okay.
Let me check this out here. Let's go back and bring that back up. We got Zach Pascal, who is all.
That's the other one. So Pascal, which listen, is he the first name on the receiving court? No, but just so you have a couple less weapons there, and that again, this is why I think this is what if I'm Phillip Rivers. This is when I look out there, especially without Doyle, who's a nice safety valve. This is when I look to T.Y. Hilton and I say, I may be able to find Campbell on some opportunities, but T.Y. Hilton, this is your opportunity to really make a statement in this season against the suspect secondary. You should have a field day. You're not the same build. You're not the same skill set as a Devontae Adams, but you are a true number 1 receiver in the league. You should be going out there and proving it this week.
Okay. So so it sounds like to me you're more in favor of an up-tempo, short, quick passing game rather than lean on the run game.
I hate to say it because the idea of reverse engineering an offensive approach, right? Where you say sometimes you always say the best way to get the running game going is to pound it early. But the best way to create space in the running game can also be some of those quick passes that start to step back that linebacking core a little bit. The interesting thing for me, though, is that you have a really good offensive line there. So I don't think it's not like you can't choose to go the route of let's start through the run game. But getting River, let's use what you did best last week, right? High volume of pass for Phillip Rivers. Had a lot of success. Couple of mistakes. Okay, fine. Still threw for over 350 yards. Still had nearly 80% completion percentage. So that worked for you. I don't know what I take away from losing week 1 to the Jaguars. Again, new quarterback, new system, new team, all those things, right? But I have to look at it and say, you have that much success in that area of the game. The run defense is your biggest concern for the Vikings. Let's start with what we think is going to get us out to a lead. Let's start with the thing that makes sure we get into our rhythm and our tempo, and then you can start to look to it. And by the way, Taylor is going to be, Taylor and Mack, in my mind, you can confirm or deny this. These are guys that can do both things for you. They can run, run out of that backfield. They can stay between the tackles. They can also be receiving threats for you at times. So you have an opportunity still to get those guys involved early as well. Start to spread out the defense and then look for those nice little bursts up the middle and get behind a quality offensive line. That's, whatever it takes to get that first touchdown. Do the best 10 scripted plays that you love, that you think work against the Vikings. And then in that second quarter, heading towards the break, or in that third quarter coming out of halftime, if you get the ball first, now look for that nice sustained drive using a blend of pass and run and really make the Vikings, just like in the Packers game. Go back and look at this one, right? Ton of points in the fourth quarter for the Vikings. They were out of this thing. They kept saying, you're fighting back within 8. They were out of this thing, throwing the ball a lot late. So that mitigated Cook, who you're concerned about out of the backfield for them. So that's the way that I think you set yourself up for success early in this game if you're the Colts.
Brees asking me if I think that Campbell is already turning into that number one option, and will he have a 100-yard game this game with a favorable matchup? It's quite possible. I don't think that they have a corner that can actually cover him, because if Pittman is on the field, that means the Vikings will have their number one and number two corners blocked up on the outside, and they're not going to have a top dog corner covering Paris Campbell, making all those cuts over the middle. He had it very close to getting his 100-yard game last week. This week, there's a good possibility. So we'll see. Yeah, he's definitely turning into that number one option, though. We're going to flip it over and talk about the Vikings offense and the Colts defense. Xavier Rhodes is on the Indianapolis Colts right now. What kind of an impact does that make when you have a number one corner from the team that you're playing against? Is there information, do you think, that they share, or do you really kind of think that they just throw away a lot of that stuff because, well, the Vikings know he's on there too, so they probably are going to be changing things up so that, he don't know?
Yeah, I sometimes I get swept up in this stuff when a player changes teams and you go, Patriots are famous for doing this, right? Picking up guys that get cut from the Jets or the Dolphins in the division, get some insights, and then they get released a week later. But in the film room, maybe that helps a little bit, communicating to other guys. But, like you say, they know him as well as he knows them. And I tend to think if you're the Colts and you're Rhodes, you're not worried about, what can you glean from us here? You're going to try to put him out there probably and tell him to take Thielen and get after that matchup. And that's going to be pretty crucial for the defensive side of the ball. If you can avoid needing over the top help more often than not in that matchup, now you create more balance for yourself. So listen, this is a get back game for Rhodes. If you want to look at it that way, Vikings didn't have a need for him. And he finds a new home there for the Colts, and this is a chance for him to prove it. And I think he'll be tested. There's weapons here still for the Vikings, and then it really turns into Kirk Cousins. And what do you think? Is he capable of exposing a matchup like that? Because I have my own thoughts about really where he is in the hierarchy of QBs in this league as well.
Where do you rank their offensive line in pass protection and run blocking for the Minnesota Vikings?
Well, I didn't love what I saw last week. The Packers defense, they were around him. They were around Cousins a lot. And you go back and take a look at that. And this is more later in the game a little bit as well, when they're getting a little bit more pass heavy. But Cousins, if I got this here right, let's see if I can get those up there. He scampered around 4 rushes for 34 yards. Now that's both something to keep an eye on. He is at least mobile or more mobile quarterback than just a pure pocket passer. At the same time, that was him kind of running for his life there a little bit in a lot of those situations. I'll flip it back at least to you in one regard. What are the expectations for the Colts defensively in terms of getting after Kirk Cousins? And do you think that, one, if you can bring that pressure, you can get home on it? And if you're not getting home on it, do you trust the linebacking core? Do you trust those safeties in support if a couple of these key scrambles maybe pop up for them earlier in the game than later, where Cousins can take a second and long or a third and middle and pick up that easy first down that ends up moving the chains?
Okay, so I think the defensive line itself, the biggest issue I have with Matt Eberflus is he loves to just send the front four, and that's it. He does not like the blitz. He didn't blitz very much at all last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. He loves having the speed at linebacker and safety to kind of, because they sit in like this zone coverage and they watch the quarterback. I don't ever expect Cousins to be able to take off and pick up chunk yards at all, because this is a defense that was built to stop Deshaun Watson, right? That's what this defense was built for. Speed, to be able to get to those really, really good scrambling quarterbacks. It's more of, I'm more afraid of, if the Colts can't get the pressure with their front four, is Cousins going to be able to just pick apart that zone defense? That's what I'm afraid of.
Well, I was going to say, because from the way you're describing it, then I look at it and I go, okay, so if he likes to just go front four and you want to trust the scheme behind them and trust the speed of your linebackers, then what you're saying is, we're going to challenge you, Kirk Cousins, with time to make those plays, right? And you and I just talked about a rookie in Joe Burrow and missing some of those deep passes, not necessarily having great deep ball accuracy. I've seen enough of Cousins over the years to say he's not one of the elite deep ball throwers. He's not one of the most pure accurate guys. Now, I think he's been able to massage numbers sometimes, depending on what the matchups are. I wouldn't be nearly as fearful of that as if you're facing one of the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the league. So, do you feel like last week that Gardner Minshew was able to basically expose that plan of attack there of just sending your front four, and now you're sitting in his zone? I mean, I know he had a nice game. The yardage wasn't huge, but the touchdowns were. So if I'm looking apples to apples there, I'd say, boy, Kirk Cousins at least can probably duplicate what we saw from Minshew. So the risk reward is, do you send some of those speed linebackers to bring that extra pressure and get it out of the hands quicker? I'm a coin flip of saying, I don't think Kirk Cousins is the greatest quarterback in the world and is really going to burn you. But because I don't think he's the greatest, a little bit extra pressure and making him throw that ball sooner than he would like can actually be a benefit to your secondary as well.
I'm right with you on that last part. I am personally now. Eberflus last year, when he realized that his front four wasn't getting it, he would send blitzes from just about everywhere, whether it be a linebacker blitz, a safety blitz, a nickel corner blitz, something in there. I would like to see that pressure sent a lot more often, especially since, Minshew only missed one pass that entire game, right? He was like 95% completion percentage because there was no pressure on him very much. I think we got 3 or 4 sacks. I think we had 4 sacks that game, but there wasn't a ton of pressure. I like the idea of just getting pressure on a guy, playing tight man to man, and making him make a decision now, right? That's what I'm a fan of. Now, obviously, you can't do that every time because that's where you're going to end up with a lot of screens and stuff like that. That's just going to blow huge chunks behind you because you're sending so much pressure. But I think a good mix would be smart by the Colts defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus in this. See how it looks on the first drive. Don't send like blitzes a whole lot on the first drive. See how it affects the game, and then sprinkle it in as needed is the way I feel. And don't ever send the same blitz twice. I did notice that Cousins on a down where he is using play action with Cook, he does not see that nickel corner blitz ever. Okay, he does not see it coming. As he's trying to hand that football off, he's not looking off to the side. He's looking at the running back and the football. And
is that where they grabbed that safety there in that last game? There was that. I don't know if that was out of the nickel that they sent that blitz, but there was a deep in their own zone for the Vikings. Packers brought the blitz off the edge. I want to say it's the nickel. Could have been coming even from the safety position, but they brought it on him, and it was just untouched, right at the quarterback, and an easy safety if there's ever such a thing.
Yeah, I don't remember if that sack came off the safety. I do remember seeing the nickel. I seen a nickel blitz earlier, and he didn't even see him. He did not see him at all until he was already in his face. So we do have a nickel corner that's very, very underrated in the NFL, and Kenny Moore, one of the, in my opinion, one of the best nickel corners in football, probably our best cornerback, and he plays nickel slot, which is weird. I'm not used to that. He doesn't play the outside. We pay him. I think he's the second highest paid nickel corner in the NFL right now. But we'll send him in on nickel blitzes a lot. He's very quick, very athletic. So I'd like to see him, and I wouldn't mind seeing either Leonard or Bobby Okereke, the two outer linebackers, just being Sam and Will, come in occasionally as well on blitzes, because I think timing blitzes in this game against Kirk Cousins will be the key to really having an edge defensively and offensively in this game.
Yeah, I think he's the kind of quarterback that you can quote unquote rattle, right? You can catch him unprepared. You can force the issue against him, and by percentage, more often than not, he's not going to burn you for the risk, right? So you take that opportunity to do so. You talk about maybe bringing some of this pressure on him, though. One of the players is may feel like the footnote for this Vikings team. They still have Rudolph there at the tight end position, and he's a classic tight end right now. He can come up short just in terms of targets and how effective is he really in the passing game. He has had big games for them over the years, of course, but if I look at that, he's a solid blocker as well. So now you're talking about if you start to see pressure coming early from the Colts defense, he can get held in there, help to assist on some of that blocking, and also becomes that bleed out threat for them in the passing game. The other guy, this is like, again, you want to get deep on this stuff. You're going to be worried about Thielen, right? Maybe you're going to be worried about, obviously, Cooks out of the backfield. Maybe you're going to even think about, is Kyle Rudolph potentially going to be a threat for us? Remember, they drafted Justin Jefferson. Only picked up a couple receptions in that first game. He's a rookie, but that's where I think you start to get into that second and third, maybe fourth level matchup where if Kirk Cousins is able to get that ball out quickly, something like that, a rookie that has a lot of natural skill set and is still getting his feet wet in the NFL, he can end up being a bit of an impact player where you start to find, even against the linebacking core for the Colts, right? Then you're talking about, can you pick this guy up, maybe coming over the middle of the field, make the big plays when you need to. So there's a bit of a mystery around some of the depth there for the receivers this year for the Minnesota Vikings. But I still agree with you, right? Timed pressure, picking your spots and bringing some of that pressure on Kirk Cousins and seeing if he can handle it. And you can do that early in the game. You can run a risk early. And if you get bit by it, fine. You can make your adjustments from that. And as long as you're still fighting in the game, you're keeping it relatively close, it's okay. You're going to have to run a risk here at some point because apples to apples, I'm probably going to hang my hat on Minnesota being the more explosive offense in this game out of the two. Doesn't mean they're the more consistent, and it doesn't mean that they're more likely to make the big plays when they need them, but they have the ability to do it. And you at least saw that in the fourth quarter when they got down big against the Packers. They can move that ball. So there's never going to come a point in this game from a Colts perspective where you say, hey, 2-touchdown lead, let's go ahead and really bunker down here and just ride this thing out. They're always going to try to be coming for you. It's going to be up to the Colts to try to force that big error, interception, safety, turnover, something along those lines, probably in and around the middle end of that third quarter where they can make a bit of that take control of the game kind of statement.
You mentioned earlier, you're talking about explosive offense, and you mentioned Kyle Rudolph being one of them, like decent security blanket that can break out and have a good game. But their second tight end has the capability of being very scary in a game. Mm-hmm. Irv Smith Jr. is a very good tight end, and it's just because he's had Kyle Rudolph in front of him is the reason why he hasn't really exploded so far in the NFL, and a lot of people don't realize who he is. But having Kyle and Irv Smith sitting there, I would not be surprised if the Colts do start sending blitzes more often, that you'll start seeing them use a 2 tight end set. And then that is a situation that I'm more afraid of than just having your classic 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers, and then Cook in the backfield. I don't like having both those tight ends for the Vikings on the field at the same time because that creates terrible mismatches in the receiving game.
Yeah, as long as you have 1 tight end that and let's label him as Rudolph here, that can help definitely in the blocking game, right? When you then introduce just a pure athlete, so I'll use the Giants as the example here in some ways. I'd prefer it if it was flip-flopped. I have my own issues with Evan Ingram. But if I have Caden Smith ahead of him, who's an okay blocker, he's still a pass catcher first. But I'd rather have kind of what I know. Give me the baseline there to start, and then give me a real X-factor kind of mystery there when I want to go 2 tight end sets. And all of a sudden, Ingram would become this incredibly dangerous weapon that puts pressure on a linebacking core if he's going to get off that line and get out in the passing game. You're right as well, right? For the Vikings, he's just been kind of hidden there. And now all of a sudden, if you run a 2 tight end set, again, you're talking about, what is he, the 3rd, 4th option that you're thinking about in terms of who you want to shut down on a given play. And because he is athletic, get that ball in his hands, that's a run after catch kind of guy for the Vikings. So the weird thing is, to me, is that he only had 1 catch last week, right? Some of the weird stuff when you look back at those stat lines over that Vikings game, for as good as they did in that fourth quarter, put up 24 points, when you start to walk through, I'll try to get these receiving numbers here. Remember, 6 catches for Thielen for 110 yards. Then you get to Busy Johnson there with just 3 for 56, 4 for 30 for Madison out of the backfield. Rudolph with just 2 for 28. So, this ball is getting spread around a bit. But even in putting up 24 points in the fourth quarter, you're still talking about Kirk Cousins going 19 to 25, nice and safe, threw 1 pick, 2 touchdowns, took the safety, and 259 yards. Like, it's a weird stat line to put up 34 points and have a relatively quiet passing performance, to couple it with the fact that even though your run game collectively with Cook and with Madison combined for 100 yards there and 134 if you throw in Kirk Cousins in his legs, but it wasn't like you were dominating there. You got behind early, so it takes away one of your best weapons in the running game. So it's just interesting to see how, in spite of all the weapons that we're listing here, we're saying, boy, concerns for the Colts. Look over here, look over there. Then you go to a game where all you need to be doing was passing the ball, and they got very locked in on Thielen, which maybe that brings me back around to that Rhodes matchup, right? That's where it starts, and you'll live with everything else that happens. If you can shut down, let's call it, quote unquote, you can take him off the board for a big chunk of this game, you'll live with whoever they end up throwing the ball to. And it's okay to, say lose the game, but it's okay to get beat up by a Kyle Rudolph if it means they weren't going to Thielen, because Rudolph isn't sprinting. He's not taking a 60 to the house and burning you past the safeties. You can control that and break them down to shorter chunk gains.
Dalvin Cook just got extended for $12.5 million a year. Massive amounts of money for someone who doesn't even have a full 2 seasons worth of games under his belt yet. Mm-hmm. But he's a very explosive. He's good on the run. He's good through the air. Do you believe, and in my opinion, I think even when the Colts are in zone defense, if there is a guy to put a spy on, Dalvin Cook's that guy.
Yep. I think 100%. You can't risk losing sight of him, because that little bleed out of the backfield, maybe on a play action or even on a straight drop back, if he just bleeds out and gets over top of that middle of the field there, even with the quickness of the linebacking core, he can get in and out of there and take that thing to the house. I mean, he is a real risk factor there. So even if you think you're controlling the run game, they can get him involved. That's the type of dynamic player you get there. To briefly talk about that contract, injury concerns, obviously had some real big ones there early in his career. I don't know, though he is the dual threat kind of guy. It's a lot of money to invest in a running back for this team at this point. That division is congested. Technically, is probably a lot more open than it's been in years past. Unless you want to base it off what you saw from Aaron Rodgers in week 1, then you think maybe not. So, they're in a weird spot there where once you let, Diggs goes away, heads to Buffalo in the offseason. Even a guy like Thielen has had a couple little minor injuries there as well. You don't know what your plan is with Kirk Cousins long-term. So I think bringing him back and Cook is saying, no matter what, we got a guy back there that can be really dynamic for us. So it's a lot of money, but I guess I'm okay with it from Minnesota's side of it. Yeah. And then in the game, man, there's nobody else. I might say he's your number 1 threat, right? I mean, as good as Thielen is in the receiving game, I think the first thing that you think about is not just as a runner, though. He can impact the game everywhere. And so do you have a linebacker in your mind that you say, hey, or you want to bring a safety down to that box to spy on him more often than not and risk the over the top if they look to go to Thielen? Or do you just pick out one of your linebackers and say, listen, this is it. Whatever happens, I don't want to see this guy 15 yards upfield coming out of the backfield and taking a dump off pass from Kirk Cousins?
I think we have both. I think we have a linebacker that can do it. Obviously, I think Darius Leonard is one of those linebackers, one of those rare linebackers you could drop on just about anybody. And I mean, he's covered wide receivers. So if he can cover wide receivers, he can cover running backs, even Dalvin Cook style running backs. But I think the best bet, the Colts have a second-year safety on their team right now. And I think that if we just use Kari Willis, bring him up, make him the spy against Cook, and keep Malik Hooker as the single over-the-top safety to protect against that deep bomb from Adam Thielen, I think that is their best option.
Yeah, it makes sense. Again, it makes sense. It makes sense to me to risk a big play to Thielen somewhere. Make Cousins prove it first. We'll adjust second. because
Exactly.
you're never going to be surprised if Cook takes that ball from however he gets it into his hands. You're only going to sit there and say, boy, why weren't you keeping an eye on that? Right. So if that methodology can work, bringing down that second year safety to spy, all the better for it. And it's the situations in this game. Again, you go back and see how they moved the ball once they were behind. So to tie it in to both sides of this, what the Colts are doing offensively is also going to dictate what they have to think about doing defensively. If you get out to that early lead, you can start to take some of those chances, send that pressure on Cousins, make them earn it for you. If you're in the tight ball game, then I think you get into the let's spy on Cook, let's try to control him, let's keep forcing Cousins to make those plays and trust the back end of our defense. And I also think too, by the way, I know coming into the season that the Colts are a fairly high-rated defense around the league. Whatever it is that happened there week 1 against the Jaguars, I'm still on the side of this is one of the better defenses in the league. And I think that even with the weapons we're talking about with Minnesota, they should be able to match up here. There's nothing here that scares me to the point where I say the Colts are going to be trailing here by multiple scores. And then you're putting a lot of pressure on Phillip Rivers to move this ball consistently and somewhat quickly, potentially in the second half.
Now, you and I, we've talked about that first game, that first week 1 in the NFL. That's one of those weeks that you could pretty much just kind of take what you saw with a grain of salt because, there was so little preparation for the week and the teams were only practicing for a month. So defenses obviously still haven't gotten everything down. They didn't have live tackling all the way up until that game because of no preseason, right? Not a lot to work with right leading up to week 1. So I think week 2, week 3, like we were talking about, will be a more of a bar setter for this for teams. And to be fair, I was telling everybody before the game that Jacksonville's got a passing attack.
Yeah, sneaky good there.
Very, very sneaky good. Chenault and Shark are very good. D.D. Westbrook, Keelan Cole, they've got receivers, and that undrafted free agent running back just looked phenomenal, really, coming out of that backfield.
They're a funny team, but it's funny the perception of them. And you get why, right? A lot of pieces strip away from there. But you go back to last year, and even coming into this season, everyone talks about, well, the Jaguars' plan is to tank, and let's go ahead and get ourselves that franchise QB. And I kind of said at the time, going back to last season, I was talking about it with Andy on the podcast and saying, listen, they may be fine with if that's the way the season goes, so be it, right? And we'll be excited to have that pick in the draft. But I was like, why wouldn't you be more confident in Minshew? He had a quietly solid season last year. Like there's something weird. Maybe it's because he's a little bit of an odd character. He has some fun there on social media over the offseason, but he's proving it. And I think that they went with obviously a youth movement in a lot of positions, a lot of areas, and that makes them exciting. And having the lack of preseason means that you can get caught off guard by some of those matchups and not realize how deep they are at wide receiver and not realize that, yeah, maybe Jordan Minshew is just a pretty darn good quarterback that you might rather have than a lot of more, name cachet guys around the league. So, but midway point of this season, you may look back as a Colts fan and go, oh, you know what? We thought at the time, you hate to lose that game to the Jaguars, but you may find that they're borderline-ish 500 team around the midway point of this season. And that just means that it validates it, right? In a weird offseason like it was, it's going to take a handful of weeks before the good and the bad shake out here. And you get real defined ideas about who the quality teams are and who are teams that were maybe benefiting from the lack of time around this type of season. I think, again, the Colts are one of those ones. The further you get into the season, the better they're going to look.
All right, so we've come to that part, I believe, where we're going to make some picks. All right, so who do you got? What kind of score are you looking at for Sunday?
Yeah, listen, the line on this one is -3 from the Colts, so you guys are favored in it, which is nice. Now you are at home, so that means it's a borderline pick 'em, so which I think is where it should be. And then you're talking about the over-under at 48.5 right now. So anticipating scoring, I don't think it's the kind of thing where you're expecting a blowout on one side or the other of this. Again, everything that we've talked about is saying even quality players on both sides of the ball for both teams, some holes here and there. So, listen, Philip Rivers showed you a couple of things. Has the accuracy, has the veteran experience to understand how to work against the defense when he needs to. Key factors for me are the running game for the Colts. Can Taylor maybe be a bit of a surprise here in just his second week and be a bit more of a factor in both phases, passing and running? And then defensively, does Rhodes match up well against Thielen? Does he create an advantage for that defense to say, let's pin our ears back a little bit and maybe force your coordinator to say, you know what, it's not my style, but I'm going to send a little bit of pressure here and try to get Kirk Cousins moving. I think the Colts come out here and win this one. I think they put the Vikings in a hole here at 0-2 to start off the season. And I think the Colts get right back into the mix of things there. So, at 48.5 over, I feel good about sending out now what was the final score there that last week's game, just before I do it? What did you guys finish there with?
2027, I think.
Okay. So, I mean, listen, when you look at the amount of yardage that Rivers was able to put up, I think it's just about punching it in. Wipe away a couple of interceptions, be a little bit smarter with the football. I think, one was his fault, one wasn't. So be a little bit smarter, maybe get T.Y. Hilton going a little bit earlier. I'm more than comfortable with what I saw from this Minnesota Vikings defense against the Packers. I'll go out there and give you a 27-21. I think that's a nice place to live. It's right around there. That's not slightly taking the under in it, but I think that the Colts should feel comfortable having control of this game. And again, maybe it comes down to the back end of this here, where can you hold off the Vikings? And I'm probably trending a little low here. This should be maybe a little bit closer to 31-24, 31-27. But I got my money on the Colts in this one. They get back on track 1-1 here after 2 games.
So my cat says hi.
There you
Get
go.
down, girl.
Pick them. In on the picks. Come on now. In on the picks.
Yeah. So you are correct in the yardage and the scoring. They got into the red zone. They actually got inside the 10-yard line twice and came away with nothing. Yeah. One time was they went forward on 4th down and didn't get it, and another time was a missed field goal by the rookie undrafted free agent Rodrigo Blankenship. I don't think that's going to happen in this Sunday's game. I think they're still going to have good offense. I think their running game may actually be a little bit better because now the offensive line will know how to block for Jonathan Taylor. They were blocking for Marlon Mack, and running backs are different on how they like their blocks set up in front of them. And
another great example of lacking the preseason, right? You need some game reps to understand where they want to go and for him to learn where they want to move to, right?
Exactly. See, Mack was getting like 6 yards a carry, whereas Taylor was getting like 3, because they didn't understand how Taylor wants it blocked out, and Taylor didn't understand, their little intricacies in that situation as well. I think the running game ends up doing a lot better. I hope to see a lot of 2-back formations. I'd love to see Taylor and Hines in the backfield at the same time, especially on like 3rd and medium, 3rd and short. I think that would scare a lot of defenses, because if you got Hines going one way and you got Taylor going the other, and Rivers is like, well, which way's the linebackers leaning towards? I'll just throw the other direction.
Real quick here, by the way, 41-19 time of possession, Packers over the Vikings last week. So, Colts have a better defense. You should be able to avoid some of those late let-ups that the Packers had. Control this game. That's how you dictate, control this game, get yourself out there and make them chase you. I mean, that cannot be overlooked in spite of the score. You look at the box score and you go, wow, a lot of points for the Vikings. You did a lot of that late when you needed it. Prior to that 4th quarter, you were being held in check. You were having a lot of 3-and-outs, a lot of, had a couple of turnovers there. So don't get tricked by it. The Colts should be a little bit more confident even than what my prediction says.
Yeah, I got the Colts winning. I think they win 31-24. I think
there goes, right in that wheelhouse, right?
Yeah, that's about where I've got them. I don't think the Vikings will ever be out of the game. I don't think there's going to be a point in the game where you're like, well, the Colts are going to run away with this. I think the Vikings offense is definitely effective, and they have pieces on that defense. That front 7 has good linebackers. They got a pass rusher. They got some safeties. The corners is what I'm a little worried about on them. I think the Colts can actually really take advantage of the corner situation. I think Philip Rivers, due to his accuracy and experience, will be able to do that. I see the Colts winning this. But then again, I said the Colts was going to whoop the snot out of Jacksonville. But Yeah, let's see how that went.
Well, listen, you hang your hat on the fact. By the way, but by the way, too, it's worth remembering, right? For whatever the Vikings did, some differences there in wide receiver, but they're returning, same quarterback, same system, same head coach, same key players here. So again, from a Colts side of it, this is week one. Learning a new running back, learning your new quarterback, getting familiarity. So if there's ever an opportunity to err on the side of, well, we just needed a couple of reps here to figure it out, I think the Colts can take it, or at least find, some confidence in that and say, this will look like last week, minus a couple of those key mistakes that cost us arguably, 10 points, right?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think there was a multiple point swings. There was that interception. Another one, pick six that Rivers threw.
Right.
So that's a big switch on points. But either way, I think the Colts will end up doing a lot better this week, especially I think even coaching. I think they'll call plays a little bit better. Eberflus now understands a little bit more on what his defense is like and what he needs to do to adjust defensively, scheme wise. To better take advantage of his skill sets that he has on that defense versus the opposing offenses. But then again, to be fair, the Vikings, they're kind of in the same boat, right?
Hey, it's a coaching league. That's what I say. It's a coaching league. So what does the coaching staff of the Colts look at and say, okay, little tweak here, little adjustment there, and now we see if that's the solution in week two.
Yep. All right, everybody. I want to thank everyone for joining here on Sporstcastr. We got Texas Gal 3395 to add on to the other people that I mentioned earlier. Don't forget, please hit the like button. Please share. Don't forget to follow myself. Don't forget to follow Adam Armbrecht on Sportscaster. Now, I don't know about YouTube. Do you have a channel on YouTube right now that you got going?
It's in its infancy, we'll put it that way. So we won't worry too much about that, but you can follow me on Sportscastr, obviously. And then if you stumbled into this accidentally and you're a Giants fan and you don't know what you came in here for, you can also check out the One Giant podcast where I have my partner, Andy Makowitz. We break down that. So we just put out our episode looking ahead at that Bears matchup there, where incidentally, if you guys end up crossing over and seeing them at some point this season, because you're playing that division, I don't know if they come across your schedule there. Maybe there's some insights there that you guys can take a look at from a Colts side perspective and say, hey, maybe we can learn something here over on Sunday as the Giants try to, by the way, get out of their own 0-1 start to the season. So check that out. And then, of course, if you're in here and you weren't able to ask a question of Lawrence or ask a question of myself, subscribe to Sportscastr. It's an easy, quick login. It's free. You get involved, and then all of a sudden you can start really throwing some fire our way and see if we can answer those questions, field them accurately, and give you a response that meets the muster.
Absolutely. Just make sure you do that. Make sure you get a profile on Sportscastr, whether no matter where you're watching this or listening to as a podcast. Either way, make sure you get the Sportscastr. Check it out. I don't know if they have grouped out on Sportscastr News. If they don't, I need to talk to my boss about possibly doing that and getting everybody as a group on Sportscastr News on who to follow. That way they could just click on that and get all of our professional coverage of different sports such as baseball, basketball, football. Until next time, hey, don't forget every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I am here. I will be covering whatever Colts game that's coming up the previous week. So make sure you hit the share button and hit the like button. Make sure that you mark this down because I will be here every Friday, 5 p.m. And then I'll be here on Mondays as well to go over the post-game shows. And until next time, I'm Lawrence Owen. Thank you, Adam, for joining me.
Always a pleasure, sir.
All right. And until next time, have a good one.